I am Lyra, 26 years old, and yesterday my world turned upside down when I became a millionaire overnight. My Uncle Benjamin left me everything: his sprawling ranch estate in Montana, $1 million, and his successful cattle operation. I was still drowning in grief when the impossible happened. Through the mahogany doors of the law office walked the two people I never thought I'd see again, my parents, the same ones who vanished from my life 12 years ago without so much as a goodbye note. They smiled like no time had passed, like they hadn't shattered a 14-year-old girl's world into pieces. "Sweetheart," my mother announced with that same sweet voice I remembered, "we're still your legal guardians." Then Attorney Morrison entered the room, and I watched their confident faces drain of all color. Before I dive into this wild story, let me paint you the picture of how I got here. My childhood in Denver started normal enough, living in a cozy 2-bedroom house with parents who seemed to love me. Dad worked as a regional sales manager for Ford, and Mom taught second grade at Riverside Elementary. We weren't rich, but we had movie nights with homemade popcorn, camping trips to Rocky Mountain National Park, and Christmas mornings with hot cocoa and cinnamon rolls from scratch. But there were warning signs I was too young to understand. The hushed arguments behind their bedroom door that grew more frequent each month. The mysterious phone calls Dad would take outside in the backyard. Mom's increasing sick days that left her in bed with the curtains drawn tight against the Colorado sunshine. Dad's harmless poker nights with his buddies slowly evolved into weekend trips to Black Hawk casinos in the mountains. I remember one night hearing Mom's broken sobs through the thin walls, begging him to stop before we lost our house. He promised he would quit, swore on my life he'd change. But Dad's promises were like autumn leaves in Colorado, beautiful for a moment, then scattered by the first strong wind. Mom changed too. Her bright smiles faded to hollow expressions. The refrigerator stayed half empty, and when I asked about groceries, she'd snap that I needed to learn to make do. Some evenings, I'd catch her staring at me like she was trying to memorize every detail of my face, then she'd burst into tears and lock herself in the bathroom for hours. I tried to be the perfect daughter. I kept my grades up at Jefferson Middle School, cleaned the house without being asked, and never complained when my clothes got too small and weren't replaced. I thought if I could just be good enough, smart enough, helpful enough, everything would return to normal. The day they abandoned me is burned into my memory like a brand. It was a Thursday in September, unusually cold for early fall in Denver. I woke up late because Mom hadn't come to get me ready for school, something that had never happened before. The house felt wrong immediately. Too quiet. Too empty. Like all the life had been sucked out of it overnight. Their bedroom door stood wide open, and I could see the closet doors gaping like hungry mouths, half the hangers empty. The abandoned hangers swayed slightly in the morning breeze from their open window, creating an eerie creaking sound that made my 14-year-old heart pound. Mom's dresser drawers were pulled out, with only a few forgotten socks and old receipts remaining. The bathroom medicine cabinet hung open, nearly empty except for my toothbrush standing alone like a sentinel. On the kitchen counter, beside the coffee maker that hadn't been used, I found a single sheet of notebook paper in Mom's careful handwriting. "Lyra, we can't do this anymore. Uncle Ben will take care of you. We're sorry." 18 words. 12 years of my life reduced to 18 words on yellow paper. I called Mom's cell phone repeatedly, each unanswered ring making my chest tighter until I could barely breathe. Dad's number was already disconnected, just 3 sharp beeps followed by a robotic voice saying the number was no longer in service. I tore through every drawer, looking for Uncle Ben's contact information, emergency numbers, anything that might explain what was happening to my world. I had met Uncle Benjamin only a handful of times. He was Dad's older brother, a stern rancher who lived in Billings, Montana. He'd never married, never had kids, and according to my parents, never really approved of their lifestyle. I had no way to reach him, no idea if he even knew what they'd done. That first night, I survived on cereal and peanut butter sandwiches, too terrified to tell anyone what had happened. What if they put me in foster care? What if my parents came back and I was gone? I slept on the living room couch, jumping at every sound, waiting for headlights in the driveway that never came. On the second day, Mr. Henderson, our landlord, knocked on the front door demanding overdue rent money. When I told him my parents were out of town, his eyes narrowed suspiciously. "Where exactly did they go, kid? And for how long?" I stammered something about visiting relatives, but he wasn't buying it. "I might need to make some calls," he muttered, walking away. By the third day, With the refrigerator nearly empty and my nerves completely shot, I finally called my school counselor, Mrs. Rodriguez. Within 2 hours, she was at my door with a social worker named Ms. Thompson, who had kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and spoke in a voice that reminded me of warm blankets on cold nights. "Your uncle has been located," Ms. Thompson said after making several phone calls from our kitchen table. "He's driving down from Montana to collect you tomorrow." I heard her side of the phone conversation. "Sir, your niece has been abandoned by her parents." "Yes, I understand this is sudden, but she has no other family. Tomorrow would be best. She can't stay alone another night." Uncle Benjamin arrived the next morning in a dusty black pickup truck that looked out of place in our suburban Denver neighborhood. He wore faded jeans, work boots, and a denim shirt with pearl snaps. His weathered face, lined from years of Montana sun and wind, showed determination mixed with what might have been resignation. "Pack light," he instructed, his voice gruff but not unkind. "We can ship anything else you need later." The drive from Denver to Uncle Ben's ranch outside Billings took 6 hours through some of the most beautiful and desolate country I'd ever seen. He didn't talk much except to ask if I needed food or bathroom breaks at gas stations along Interstate 25. I stared out the window, watching my old life literally disappear in the rearview mirror as we climbed through Colorado's mountains and descended into Wyoming's endless plains. Uncle Ben's Circle B Ranch sprawled across 2,000 acres of Montana grassland, with the Yellowstone River winding through the eastern pastures. The main house was a 2-story log home with a wraparound porch and massive stone chimney. My new bedroom was bigger than our entire living room back in Denver, with windows facing the Beartooth Mountains and a view that stretched for miles without a single neighbor in sight. The rules at the ranch were simple but non-negotiable: breakfast at 5:30 a.m. sharp, chores before school, homework completed before dinner, and no complaining about anything. Ever. "Ranch life teaches you that whining doesn't feed cattle or fix broken fences," Uncle Ben explained on my first morning. "Out here, you work or you don't eat." I broke every rule in the first month, testing boundaries like any traumatized teenager would. But Uncle Ben never threatened to send me away. Instead, each infraction came with natural consequences. Late to breakfast meant no breakfast, the kitchen closed at 6 a.m. Homework left undone meant weekend plans were cancelled until assignments were completed to his satisfaction. Behind his gruff exterior, though, I occasionally glimpsed unexpected gentleness. Like when he found me crying over a photo of my parents on Christmas morning, and instead of telling me to move on, he silently handed me his handkerchief and sat beside me on the porch swing until the tears stopped. Or when I failed my first algebra test despite studying for hours, and he hired a tutor from town rather than lecturing me about trying harder. Uncle Ben had built his wealth from a small inheritance, expanding his grandfather's modest cattle operation into one of Montana's most successful ranches. He worked 16-hour days during calving season, but always made it back to the house for dinner, often bringing paperwork to complete afterward by lamplight. On weekends, he took me with him to livestock auctions, expecting me to observe and learn. "Watch how they evaluate cattle," he'd instruct, leaning against the auction ring fence. "Notice what the successful bidders look for, how they stay calm under pressure, when they know to walk away. Business is about reading people and situations, not just numbers on paper." Education was sacred to Uncle Ben. When Billings Central High School proved inadequate, he enrolled me in Canyon Creek Academy, a private school 40 minutes away that demanded excellence from every student. The transition was brutal. My Denver public school hadn't prepared me for the academic rigor, and the other students came from wealthy ranching families with generations of Montana history behind them. I struggled with advanced courses, spending hours at the kitchen table with textbooks while Uncle Ben worked on ranch accounts nearby. There were nights I wanted to give up, convinced I'd never belong in this world of privilege and rural traditions. But Uncle Ben wouldn't accept surrender. "Your circumstances changed through no fault of your own," Uncle Ben told me one night when I was sobbing over a failed chemistry exam. "But your response to those circumstances is entirely your choice. You can use this opportunity to build something better, or you can waste it feeling sorry for yourself. The decision is yours, but I don't invest in quitters." It wasn't the warm comfort I craved, but his blunt honesty somehow steadied me. I hired a peer tutor with money from my ranch work allowance and formed study groups with classmates who initially saw me as the city kid who didn't belong. By junior year, I had earned my way onto the honor roll and gained genuine respect from teachers and students alike. College applications brought new tension between us. I wanted to attend University of Colorado in Boulder where several friends were headed, but Uncle Ben pushed for more prestigious options. Your friends aren't thinking strategically about their futures, he said. They're thinking about extending their social lives. You need to consider what will actually build your career. Our biggest argument erupted over this difference in vision. I accused him of trying to control my life, just like my parents had. He countered that I was wasting potential out of fear and comfort-seeking. I never asked to be your project. I shouted. And I never asked to raise a teenager, he replied calmly. Yet here we are. I'm trying to give you opportunities your parents never had. That silenced me, and in the quiet that followed, Uncle Ben did something unprecedented. He told me about my father's childhood, something he'd never discussed before. Your dad was brilliant, he said softly, staring out at the mountains. He could fix any engine, solve complex problems in his head, had natural leadership abilities. But our parents couldn't afford college for both of us. I got the ranch inheritance when Grandpa died, and your father got nothing but resentment. He started gambling to get rich quick since education wasn't an option anymore. Your mother was the same, bright but limited by circumstances and poor choices. I'm trying to break that cycle for you. It was the first time he'd spoken about my parents without anger or disappointment. It gave me insight into their lives I'd never had and helped me understand his seemingly harsh determination to push me academically. I applied to 8 schools and was accepted at 6. Ultimately, I chose Northwestern University to study agricultural business and marketing. Uncle Ben paid the substantial tuition without complaint, though I knew it stretched even his considerable resources. College in Chicago opened up a world I'd never imagined. I joined the Agricultural Economics Club, made friends from every background imaginable, and discovered talents I never knew I possessed. I had a natural gift for marketing strategy and financial analysis that complemented the practical knowledge Uncle Ben had instilled in me. My summers were spent back at the ranch, working alongside the hired hands and learning every aspect of the operation from feed management to livestock genetics. Our relationship evolved during those college years. The physical distance somehow allowed emotional closeness to develop. Our Sunday phone calls became less formal, occasionally including laughter and genuine conversation about my dreams and ambitions. When I graduated summa cum laude, the pride in Uncle Ben's weathered face was unmistakable. I moved back to the ranch after graduation, taking on the role of business manager for the Circle B operation. Uncle Ben and I developed a comfortable partnership, 2 independent people sharing responsibilities and occasional meals. I dated occasionally, though he subtly discouraged any relationship that might take me away from Montana permanently. Then 3 years ago, everything changed when Uncle Ben was diagnosed with lung cancer. The prognosis was poor from the beginning, but he approached his illness with the same stoic determination he applied to everything else. We all die, he said when I broke down after hearing the diagnosis. The only question is what we accomplish with the time we have left. He continued working as long as possible, gradually transitioning more responsibilities to me as his strength failed. Our roles reversed slowly. I became the one scheduling doctor appointments, managing his medications, and ensuring he ate enough to maintain his weight during chemotherapy. In his final months, a surprising tenderness emerged in Uncle Ben. One evening, as I helped him into bed, he gripped my hand with unexpected strength. You were the daughter I never allowed myself to want, he whispered. Taking you in was the best decision I ever made. You saved this old ranch and this old man more than you'll ever know. He passed peacefully in his sleep 6 months after the diagnosis. The funeral filled the Billings Methodist Church with ranchers, business associates, and townsfolk whose lives he'd touched over 5 decades in Montana. I stood at the graveside, realizing he had become my true father in every way that mattered. The grief was overwhelming. The ranch house echoed with emptiness, and I found myself listening for his boots on the wooden floors or saving newspaper articles about cattle prices that I thought might interest him. But I continued running the operation as he taught me, honoring his legacy through action rather than sentiment. I never expected to see my biological parents again until the will reading changed everything. 2 weeks after the funeral, I received a formal letter from Attorney Morrison, Uncle Ben's lawyer for over 20 years. The will reading was scheduled for the following Monday at 10 a.m. at his downtown Billings office. The letter mentioned that all interested parties would be present, but I assumed this meant only me and perhaps some ranch employees or charitable organizations Uncle Ben might have included. Morrison was a distinguished man in his 60s, with silver hair and a gravitas that came from handling Montana's most important legal affairs for decades. His office overlooked the Yellowstone River, with dark wood paneling and leather-bound law books that had probably witnessed thousands of life-changing moments. I arrived 15 minutes early, dressed in a navy blue suit Uncle Ben would have approved of. Morrison greeted me warmly, expressing condolences before mentioning we were waiting for others before beginning. I settled into a leather chair, flipping through Ranch and Cattle magazine without absorbing any content. The door opened and I looked up, expecting to see one of the ranch foremen or maybe the banker who'd handled Uncle Ben's accounts. Time stopped. Standing in the doorway were two people I'd convinced myself I might never see again, my parents. My father had aged dramatically. His once thick dark hair was now completely gray and thinning, deep lines carved from his nose to his mouth, and his shoulders hunched forward like he was carrying invisible weight. He'd gained at least 40 pounds, his formerly athletic build now soft and round beneath an ill-fitting suit that had seen better days. My mother looked even more transformed. Her blonde hair was cut severely short in a style that didn't flatter her angular face, which had grown thin and sharp. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and when she smiled, it never reached them. She wore a dress that might have been fashionable a decade ago, clutching her purse with white-knuckled intensity. "Lyra," my father said, his voice rougher than I remembered. "Look at you, all grown up and sophisticated." They moved toward me, and I found myself rising on unsteady legs. My mother reached for an embrace I couldn't return, standing stiffly as her arms encircled me. Her perfume was both familiar and foreign, the same scent from my childhood but somehow wrong now. "We've been trying to find you for years," my mother said, stepping back to examine me. "You look so much like your uncle now. So poised and successful. How did you know about today?" I managed to ask, my voice sounding strange. "We saw the obituary in the Billings Gazette," my father explained with a forced smile. "We've been keeping tabs on family from a distance. We knew you were with Ben, of course." Of course they knew where I'd been all these years and never once reached out. The room seemed to tilt slightly. "Please everyone sit," Morrison interjected, gesturing to chairs arranged around his massive desk. "We have one more person joining us." Mrs. Patterson, Uncle Ben's longtime housekeeper, entered quietly. She'd worked at the ranch for over 15 years and had been like a grandmother to me. She nodded sympathetically before taking a seat as far from my parents as possible. As we waited, my parents attempted small talk that felt surreal. "We live in Phoenix now," my mother offered. "The warm climate helps your father's back problems." "I manage a quick-stop convenience store," my father added. "Nothing fancy, but it pays the bills and keeps us stable." I nodded mechanically, unable to formulate responses. Inside, emotions churned violently: anger, confusion, hurt, and a treacherous flicker of the old longing all battling for dominance. Morrison cleared his throat and opened a thick folder. "We're here to execute the last will and testament of Benjamin Charles Anderson," he began formally. "I'll summarize the key provisions before providing copies to relevant parties." My parents leaned forward slightly, an almost imperceptible movement that suddenly made their presence at this reading crystal clear. They hadn't come for closure or reconciliation. They hadn't come to express condolences or check on my well-being. They had come for money. Morrison adjusted his reading glasses. "To my beloved niece, Lyra Michelle Anderson." The word Anderson hit me like lightning. When had Uncle Ben legally changed my name? "I leave the entirety of my estate," Morrison continued, "including the Circle B ranch property consisting of 2,000 acres, the main residence and all outbuildings, my complete cattle operation valued at approximately $800,000, all bank accounts and investment portfolios totaling $1.2 million in liquid assets, my personal effects including vehicles and equipment, and all business interests and partnerships." The room fell silent. I had expected to inherit the ranch, but the full scope of Uncle Ben's wealth was staggering. My father coughed. "Excuse me, Mr. Morrison, is there anything else?" Morrison looked at him over his glasses. "There are smaller bequests to longtime employees," he said, nodding toward Mrs. Patterson, "and detailed instructions for charitable donations. But the bulk of the estate passes to Lyra as stated." My mother's smile tightened. "Well, this is quite a responsibility for someone so young. Fortunately, as her parents, we're in a position to help manage these assets." Morrison raised an eyebrow but said nothing. Legally speaking, my father added with forced casualness, since Lyra was a minor when Ben took her in, and there was never formal termination of our parental rights, we remain her legal guardians. Panic shot through me, but Morrison spoke first. I believe there's considerable confusion about legal status here, he said calmly. Perhaps we should continue tomorrow when I can have all relevant documentation prepared. Shall we say 2 p.m.? After they left, promising to catch up properly over lunch, Morrison's expression grew serious. Your uncle anticipated this possibility, he said. He legally adopted you when you turned 16, though he kept your original surname initially. The adoption was finalized 3 years ago when he added Anderson to your legal name. He has extensive documentation of your parents' abandonment and their complete absence from your life. The next day's meeting was swift and brutal. Morrison presented court documents, private investigator reports showing my parents had known my location for years without contact, and recordings of phone calls where they'd actually called Uncle Ben demanding money in exchange for not challenging my placement. Furthermore, Morrison said, removing a sealed envelope, Ben left this letter specifically for this situation. I read Uncle Ben's final words aloud. If you're reading this, your parents have returned seeking money, not reconciliation. I have protected you legally and financially. You owe them nothing. Family is built through daily choices, not DNA. Trust your judgment, not their guilt trips. My father's face darkened. This isn't over. We have rights. Actually, Morrison replied calmly, any legal challenge would trigger a clause transferring the entire estate to the Montana Children's Foundation. There would be nothing left for anyone to claim. Their attorney, looking embarrassed, whispered urgently to them. Within minutes, they were gone, muttering threats that rang hollow in the face of Uncle Ben's thorough protection. 6 months later, I've transformed the ranch into a working therapy center for abandoned children, using Uncle Ben's legacy to heal others as he healed me. Sometimes the family we choose teaches us more about love than the family we're born into. Blood may be thicker than water, but loyalty runs deeper than blood. Uncle Ben proved that every single day for 12 years, and now I'm passing that lesson forward.